Welcome to the Oregon Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs Training on Fiscal Management Procedures for Child and Adult Care Food Program sponsors. The Child and Adult Care Food Program will be known as CACFP for the rest of this presentation. The purpose of this training is to provide guidance to CACFP sponsors on creating a written fiscal procedure for the CACFP. In this training, we will review learning objectives, then go over the fiscal management requirements for CACFP, then discuss VCA and control activities, and then delve into writing CACFP fiscal management procedures. Finally, we'll go over a sample nonprofit food service procedure that follows these guidelines. After viewing this training, viewers will understand the CACFP sponsor requirements for fiscal management, learn how fiscal management intersects with CACFP performance standards, which are also known as VCA, and review a written fiscal management policy and procedure that meets CACFP guidelines. CACFP fiscal management requirements are listed in 7 CFR 226.6 B2, 7, C, 2, and 4. CACFP sponsoring organizations must ensure that there is fiscal integrity of all program funds, accountability of all expenses, that program funds are only used for authorized program purposes, that safeguards are in place to prevent improper financial activities, and that CACFP administrative costs do not exceed the regulatory limits of 15% of reimbursement. These requirements apply to all CACFP sponsors. What does fiscal integrity mean? The definition of fiscal integrity includes ensuring that CACFP sponsors are maintaining a nonprofit food service. A nonprofit food service is maintained when sponsors are able to ensure that program reimbursement funds are used solely for the operation and improvement of the CACFP. Any unspent funds must be used for child nutrition programs. In short, sponsors cannot profit from CACFP reimbursements. To determine whether nonprofit food service is being met, you must have a system to track CACFP reimbursement funds and expenses. Tracking funds and expenses are part of fiscal accountability. Accountability comes in when sponsors are tracking and keeping documentation that supports both income and expenses for CACFP. Some examples of documentation include claim reimbursement documentation, bank statements, food and non-food receipts or invoices for CACFP meals, timesheets and payroll, utility bills and cost allocation documentation for those bills, profit and loss statements, and possibly more, depending on your program and what you're charging to your nonprofit food service account. Knowing what you can charge to your nonprofit food service account is important. Authorized program costs are defined in FNS Instruction 796-2, Revision 4, as costs from food service activities benefiting enrolled participants in the CACFP. For example, these will include food costs for CACFP meals and snacks. It can also include labor costs to produce CACFP meals and snacks, and it may also include some allocated utility costs for the kitchen. Another category of costs that may be authorized include administrative costs. Administrative costs must be tracked separately from operational costs. Administrative costs charged to CACFP funds cannot exceed 15% of total reimbursements received for your CACFP meals and snacks. All administrative costs incurred that exceed 15% limitation must be charged to another source of funds. This is because the CACFP is a food program, and the intention is for reimbursing food costs. Administrative costs can include the labor costs for coordinators and monitors. Additional authorized program costs are laid out in FNS Instruction 796-2, Revision 4. In all cases, to be allowable, costs must be necessary for the CACFP, reasonable in price, and current to the fiscal year. Allocated costs are costs that benefit more than one program and are shared costs. You can only assign the allowable share to CACFP, and this allowable share or allocation rate must be consistently applied across all programs. For example, you may want to charge electricity, water, and garbage bills to the CACFP. In these cases, since programs outside of CACFP also benefit from the use of electricity, water, and garbage, you'll want to allocate the costs across all programs that benefit. FNS 796-2 Revision 4 has more information on how to allocate costs. There are some costs that you may have as an organization that cannot be charged to the CACFP Nonprofit Food Service account. These non-allowable costs are ones that are not necessary to the CACFP, are not reasonable in price, or are not current to the fiscal year. These costs can include food or non-food costs for non-program purposes such as coffee and tea for the staff or party supplies for a classroom celebration. While administrative costs can be charged, you are only allowed to charge based on the actual costs incurred up to 15% of total reimbursements. Any administrative costs beyond 15% are considered non-allowable. Utilities can only be charged if they are allocated correctly. And finally, any costs that do not have supporting documentation would be considered non-allowable. Understanding CACFP requirements are important to preventing improper financial activities. Know that your CACFP reimbursements and any additional CACFP income you received must not be used for any other purpose other than to benefit your CACFP program. To prevent improper financial activities, it's important to have more than one staff overseeing fiscal management. While you may have one person who's responsible for the bulk of the work related to fiscal management, it's important for additional staff to have oversight and provide double checks to make sure the implementation is adequate. The best way to make sure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to CACFP fiscal requirements is to have a written procedure for CACFP fiscal management. This is a requirement of CACFP, and sponsors were notified of this requirement on February 8, 2021 by email. If you didn't see this notification or did not receive it, the notification is also available on the ODE-C&P CACFP Memos, News, and Regulations page. Having written procedures is required and will help CACFP sponsors meet the CACFP performance standards. If you're not familiar with the CACFP performance standards, they are financial viability, administrative capability, and program accountability. Together, they're also known as VCA. While all three standards are important, written policies and procedures fall under the category of administrative capability and program accountability as part of internal controls. A sponsor's success in CACFP is often determined by the strength of their internal controls. Capability and accountability are cornerstones of program integrity. They help ensure that sponsoring organizations are qualified and capable of running CACFP, and this is included as part of the regulatory language in 7 CFR 226.6, Section B27. Being both capable and accountable means that sponsors are more likely to have well-run and successful CACFP sites. Program accountability is directly linked to the internal controls or control activities that sponsors implement. What are control activities? Control activities are actions that help you manage your program. For CACFP, these controls translate into your written policies and procedures. Creating written policies and procedures helps to demonstrate that the organization is both capable and accountable by defining the policy, or the what, that must be followed to meet CACFP regulations, and also the procedures, or how, sponsors will meet those policies. These written procedures are the step-by-step guidelines that help your organization's staff follow or meet the CACFP regulations. Having written policies and procedures helps you to limit your risk of being out of compliance with federal regulations. Think of them as a guide for your staff to help them understand their role in the CACFP and the steps that they must take in that role to ensure compliance. Having informed staff and written guidelines means that there's a higher chance of ensuring continuity in the program, even when there are staffing changes. Now that we know why it's important to have written policies and procedures, we need to understand what needs to be included as part of a complete policy and procedure. Since all sponsoring organizations are required to have a written policy and procedure for fiscal management of the CACFP, all sponsors will need to make sure that they have one that includes the key functions of CACFP, the organization of staff responsibilities, the integration of CACFP requirements, all operational tasks and duties that are related to CACFP, and some double checks. Our recommendation is to use the ODE C&P Policy and Procedure template. The template was included as an enclosure with the February 8, 2021 Fiscal Policy and Procedure Memo, but can also be found on the ODE C&P CACFP Memos, News, and Regulations page. This is what the Policy and Procedure template looks like. It has space to write in the policy and sections to indicate the staff who are involved, when the procedures need to take place, and where procedures and documents are located. The largest section is the How Check section, where the actual step-by-step procedures can be written. Let's look in depth at the process of writing a CACFP fiscal policy and procedure. We started discussing the required elements that must be part of CACFP policies and procedures, but these can all be broken up into three key elements. First, the policy acts as the what. Essentially, what do you have to do to meet CACFP regulation? These regulations for fiscal management were what we went over in the first part of this training. Next, the procedure lays out the how. How will you get to the what? What steps do you need to take? This part will vary based on your organization's structure. And finally, we introduce the verification, which is the check or the double check to ensure that the steps laid out and taken will truly help you to get to the what. This gives us our what, our how, and our check. Breaking policies and procedures down into the what, how, and check make them seem rather simplistic, but writing out these elements may not be quite so easy. Here's a map for determining the what, laying out the how, and incorporating the check. First, an organization should always refer back to the CACFP Policy and Procedures Manual and CACFP regulations and memos to figure out the what that needs to be addressed. These are your policies and the standard that you as a sponsor of the program are held to. Next, you'll need to look at your organization and determine how you and your staff will incorporate these policies into daily operations. Once that's done, you'll lay out the step-by-step processes needed to meet each of the policies. These will be your procedures. Finally, before you're done, it's important to incorporate a double check within your procedure to verify that the procedure has been followed correctly. There are a lot of different CACFP policies that need to be followed. We'll focus on the nonprofit food service section, but know that in many cases, the policies will intersect with each other and other policies, and CACFP requirements must be taken into account when developing CACFP fiscal management procedures. If you need a refresher on the what, go to Chapter 7 of the CACFP Policy and Procedure Manual. This manual is available on the ODE C&P CACFP webpage. If you go to Chapter 7, the first sentence of the chapter states, all CACFP sponsors must maintain a nonprofit food service and keep documentation of food service expenses. This will be our what for our fiscal management policy. This is what we aim for. If you need a reminder of what nonprofit food service means, it means that sponsors must ensure the program reimbursement funds are used solely for the operation and improvement of the CACFP. Any unspent funds must be used for child nutrition programs. After you have your what, or your policy, you'll need to create a procedure, or a how, to ensure nonprofit food service. Think about your daily operations. What would implementing nonprofit food service look like for your organization? Do you currently have a system in place already? If you do, how do you make sure that you're spending all CACFP reimbursements on allowable CACFP expenses? If you don't, you need to develop a system that meets this requirement. To do this, you need to think about the allowable expenses that you have. You have all the food that you buy for CACFP, but there's also non-food items and labor costs as well. Depending on your program, you may also want to charge utilities. The next step after this is to think about who's tracking your expenses and income. How are they tracking them? Are they using an internal accounting program or a software program like QuickBooks? How often are they tracking these items? Do all your receipts just pile up in a corner until someone who has extra time organizes them? Or is this part of someone's duty and incorporated in their schedule? For those who are responsible, what documents are they reviewing? Are they looking at food receipts, non-food receipts, payroll and timesheets, and utility bills? What about donation receipts? Are they the same person that compiles and submits your claim for reimbursement each month? If not, how are they made aware of the income expected, and do they have access to the documents that are used to support the claims? Are there other sources of income into the CACFP fund, and does this person have access to that information? And when they're all done compiling, tracking, and reporting, where are the files saved? Once you've thought through how you'll incorporate these procedures into your operations, it's time to start laying out your step-by-step process. Think about who will be responsible for each task. When do you want these procedures to be completed? Where will you file away your documents showing that you met these requirements? Ultimately, how is your organization meeting this policy? Your instructions must be clear enough to allow even new staff to meet the policy. Once you finish writing out your procedures, you'll want to go through and make sure that you have checks in place. The check is the double check. Nobody is perfect, so you'll want to make sure that your system has a way to correct any errors that may happen. To make sure that double checks are well integrated into your procedures, you want to ask yourself, does the procedure require a lot of calculations? We find that calculations done by hand are often prone to miscalculations, and a double check with software or a second pair of eyes can be helpful. Also, is this procedure complicated? With multiple steps involved, sometimes it's easy for a step to get missed. Having someone else review the same documents or follow the same steps can help catch any mistakes. Next, is this an area where you know mistakes have been made before? Have you had a finding on an administrative review or site monitoring review for this procedure? Finally, be cautious when you decide on the person who's assigned to complete the double check. Are they someone with the knowledge to review this with experienced eyes? Do they know how the procedures are supposed to look when done correctly? If not, can they be trained on it? Now that we know what we need for our what, our how, and our check, let's take a look at a sample CACFP fiscal management procedure and see how well it meets these requirements. First, we have the what, the who, the when, and the where. For the what, this is our policy. In this example, it states that the policy is to maintain a CACFP nonprofit food service account and ensure all CACFP income and expenses are documented. Next, for the who, this is the staff involved with the procedure. And in this case, we'll include the cook, the bookkeeper, and the director. The when should include when procedures are undertaken. In our example, expense receipts are submitted to the bookkeeper at the end of each month when the claim is submitted, and the reimbursement income is entered in the accounting system each month after the payment is received. CACFP expenses and income are tracked on an accrual basis. If the sponsor, as in this example, does not use accrual counting to track monthly income and expenses, they must ensure that all income and expenses are reconciled at the end of the fiscal year to an accrual basis. Finally is the where, and for this example, all documents are saved in the director's office. Now let's go through the how. Let's begin with the reimbursement income received. This reimbursement claim is dependent on the point of service meal count and the meal count consolidation procedures. Remember that many of your CACFP procedures will intertwine with one another. Your organization will have specific separate procedures for various policies, but they must all complement one another to create a seamless program. For our nonprofit food service procedure, our first step is tasked to our bookkeeper, who will verify the CACFP reimbursement received and posted to our bank account, and who will then record that income in our QuickBooks software under our CACFP fund account and under revenue. Step 2 looks at the expenses. Here, the cook will review all food and non-food receipts, cross out any non-CACFP expenses. Remember, they can't be counted because they're not allowable. And then total all allowable CACFP expenses. The cook will do this as receipts come in, and then we'll send them to the bookkeeper at the end of the month. The bookkeeper will complete a double check of the receipt totals. This is part of our verification checks. The bookkeeper will do this prior to entering these receipt totals as CACFP expenses to our CACFP account. In Step 3, the bookkeeper reviews payroll costs for the cook and enters them into QuickBooks once the direct deposit of that period's payroll has been verified. If you find that you have an area where more detailed instruction is needed, you can always add a time frame for entering expenses or income. For example, instead of writing that this will be entered on a rolling basis, you can say within 3 business days, as we have here. In Step 4, the bookkeeper will create and review the monthly profit and loss statement and see if CACFP expenses exceed CACFP income. Because understanding whether you have either a profit or a loss can be important to the viability of your program, the director completes a double check of the profit and loss report to make sure that this is correct. At this point, there can be 2 outcomes. If expenses did exceed income, then the bookkeeper will need to transfer other organizational funds over to cover these costs. If there are unspent CACFP income, then the funds must remain in the account and be applied to future CACFP expenses. While CACFP income can cover CACFP and other child nutrition program costs, it cannot be used for any other business expenses. This is what it means to operate a nonprofit food service. Finally, for Step 5, the bookkeeper and the director will complete a year-end reconciliation the month following the end of the fiscal year to reconcile all transactions. It's helpful to have 2 people who are responsible for year-end reconciliations. In this case, while the bookkeeper may be more familiar with the day-to-day operations, the director may have insights into overall program operations that the bookkeeper may not know about. The end of the fiscal year may vary for your organization. At this time, any unspent CACFP funds from the previous fiscal year need to remain in the CACFP fund, and a spend-down plan must be developed. If the amount of the CACFP fund balance exceeds the average of 3 months' CACFP expenses, you must contact your assigned child nutrition specialist. Your assigned specialist must be involved in the development of the spend down plan. Remember, these funds must be spent on CACFP-related costs. If, however, CACFP costs were equal or exceeded the reimbursement income, the fund balance needs to be considered zero or made zero. If exceeded, the director and bookkeeper will transfer other organizational funds to the CACFP fund to cover these costs. The procedures shown here are only one example of a fiscal management procedure, and procedures will vary from organization to organization, since we all have different systems and different tasks. So if this doesn't seem like a good procedure for your organization, create one that will work for you. Ultimately, writing good policies and procedures requires sponsors to understand the CACFP regulations and policies that must be followed. It's crucial to incorporate these requirements into your own programs in a way that's effective and efficient. When you have good policies and procedures, it helps to ensure that you have a strong foundation for good internal controls, which lays at the heart of your organization's capability and accountability, 2 of the 3 CACFP performance standards. Remember that when we talk about viability, capability, and accountability, it's not just about a written policy and procedure. You need to consider where you're storing the policies and procedures so that they're accessible to others in your organization. Think about how you communicate these policies and procedures to your staff. At a minimum, all staff that are involved with these procedures must be trained on the step-by-step requirements. And know that procedures will need to be monitored and sometimes retrained. Just because it's written doesn't mean it's followed. However, ODE will expect that sponsors are following their own policies and procedures. This is part of VCA and part of the review process. In fact, during an administrative review, all sponsors are required to share their written CACFP policies and procedures with the reviewing specialist. As the specialist walks through documents, observes the meal service, or evaluates financial records, they're doing so keeping in mind the procedure that your organization has provided. If your organization's not following the steps that you've laid out for any part of the program, specialists may determine that creation or revision of policies and procedures is required. This will often be part of your corrective action. Here are some final thoughts about writing your fiscal management procedures. Your procedure may not look like our example, and that's okay. In fact, we expect it will look different. That's because each sponsor will have different program structures that they need to meet. Don't simply copy our procedure or someone else's because it will not be a procedure that you or your staff can effectively implement into your own organization. And this will be apparent during a review. Also, sponsors must actively practice implementing procedures. Determine the policies, write the procedures, and then put them into practice. If your process needs to change, remember to update your written procedures as well. And don't just update the document and then tuck it away in a drawer. Make sure to train all staff involved on the changes to the policy and the procedure. Make policy and procedure training part of your annual staff training. Ensure that new staff receive training on policies and procedures specific to their duties. Make CACFP policies and procedures a common language within your organization. We always recommend that sponsors review their written policies and procedures on at least an annual basis. Having good written policies and procedures is the key to success in CACFP. Before we end our session, here's a short message from the Oregon Department of Education. ODE supports equity and excellence for every learner and seeks to work with school districts, education service districts, and community partners like you. We believe all children should have access to a high-quality, well-rounded learning experience. Our stance is that education equity is the equitable implementation of policy, practices, procedures, and legislation that translates into resource allocation, education rigor, and opportunities for historically and currently marginalized youth, students, and families, including civil rights protected classes. This means the restructuring and dismantling of systems and institutions that create the dichotomy of beneficiaries and the oppressed and marginalized. Thank you for viewing this training. This institution is an equal opportunity provider.